Welcome back, and today we're going to take a look at a bunch of different flashlights from different companies. One flashlight in particular might end up being my new everyday carry. So I want to discuss what is available here. We have a variety of different sizes, shapes, and purposes. And with that, let's get started. We're going to kick things off with a pair of flashlights from Sofirn. So this is basically the same flashlight. The only difference is emitter color, so different emitters here. We have a Nitecore MT1A high CRI, and we have a cool white emitter here. Now there is a slight difference in output. You're going to have a max of 1300 from the cool white and around 1100 from the high CRI. I'm going to tell you right off the chute, if you're going to pick one of these two, you are almost definitely going to want to have the high CRI variation. The reason I believe that to be true is that even with the cool white, it's not designed to be a high beam intensity. It doesn't have a tail switch. You're not necessarily using it for defensive aspects. So you're probably going to want to have it be as useful for daily tasks as possible. And there's no reason not to take advantage of a light source that is going to be nicer to your eyes, and the high CRI is going to do that. So let me start with that. Other than the emitter, these are basically the same flashlight, and they have a very familiar user interface that you probably are already used to or have seen before. So a whole press will give you moonlight, a double press will give you turbo, which in this case will be 1100 lumens, and a triple press will give you strobe. Now, I'm not going to go into the strobe. There's actually strobe and SOS, both with triple presses. And I think you can cycle through them. But this is a very traditional UI that we've seen from a lot of different brands. It works very well, and it's very familiar, which is nice. I can just pick this up and I know how it works. It has a magnetic tail base. It has a one-directional clip, but the important thing here is that it's clipped in the correct direction. This allows me to attach it to a ball cap or other hat and use it hands-free. And I think that's a very important thing with any EDC flashlight. I refuse to get my daily dose of pocket lint by putting a flashlight into my mouth in order to work hands-free. And so for me, having a reversible clip, something that actually I can connect to my hat, is a must. So I like that quite a bit. Now, a couple of things of note here. The price on this is very good. We're looking at under $30 for either variation. And with that, you're going to get an 18350 battery that comes with the flashlight. It is replaceable. You can charge it in a bay charger, or you can charge it with the Type-C port on the back of the flashlight. So you pull this out, you can charge it right there, and then you're good to go. This is rated IP68, which is a very good rating. I definitely like that, but it still has a silicone cover that if it is removed, will lose its waterproofing. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that's worth noting, and really the only drawback that I see with this flashlight, and it's also noted in a few reviews for this on Amazon, is that it has the potential of coming on in your pocket. And that's not surprising because it uses an electronic switch that is on the side, and the button stands proud from the frame. So if you are going to use this light, I highly recommend using it in lockout most of the time. Unfortunately, this is a common problem with side switch flashlights. There are some exceptions to the rule we'll talk about in a minute, but it is definitely something of note here. Now, I should mention that single press will bring you in on the memorized mode. It cycles between 3 low, medium, and high. And then you have, of course, the turbo with a double press, the moonlight with the low mode. That's very, very similar to another flashlight, which I want to bring in for just a second, and that is the Baton 4. Now, obviously, proprietary charging is not ideal for many people, so this is still going to be very appealing. Price point is also much higher, but there's a couple things I want to focus in on the Baton 4 that I hope other companies will start paying attention to. There is absolutely zero reason not to make your button flush with the frame. Not a non-starter for me at this point. I will always choose a flashlight that's going to prevent me from accidentally pressing it. Even better is when it's made of metal and has a firm press. So it requires an actual significant amount of pressure in order to actuate the button. And it doesn't matter whether it's something like the Baton 4 or the Warrior Mini, which actually has a recessed button, which I like, that you definitely want to see that in your flashlights and consider it. The Sofirn SC13 is a fantastic entry-level flashlight. As long as you are aware of its limitations, then you should be okay. The other nice thing you can do just to kind of prevent this is move the clip around in a way that the button sits in the corner of your pocket. If you do that, it should not get accidentally pressed very easily. So try to find that angle, and then you shouldn't need to lock out the flashlight in order to prevent that kind of discharge. And with how powerful these new flashlights are, it does matter. They can get quite hot on their maximum output, and not all flashlights have an actual sensor to determine whether they are up against some material or something like that. So it is definitely something you can fix, whether through lockout or just orientation, but you need to be made aware of it. So SC13, good offering from Sofirn. I just want to see a better button. I don't see why that silver collar could not be raised to the point where it is in the same height as the button, because when you press in, you're going to go inside that, and there's a very short button distance to actuate the light. So it wouldn't really make much of a difference to either lower the button all the way to be flush or raise the collar up in order to prevent accidental depressing of the button. That's pretty much it. The Sofirn SC13, I'll put some stats right here, is a fantastic budget flashlight that's going to run an 18350, and being Type-C recharging gives it some huge advantages over its competition. Let me know what you think down below. Do you prefer this type of light, or do you prefer a different sized EDC flashlight, whether it's a larger 18650 or something closer to a AA or AAA? Now, speaking of AA's, this is the MT1A Pro. This is the little brother of a recent flashlight released by Nitecore that uses a longer barrel, up to 2 AA batteries, and an output of 1000 lumens. This flashlight reaches 800 lumens. And what's really remarkable is it's barely any dimmer than its larger brother, with over 15,000 candela, which is a very important stat for this light. This thing is a pocket rocket. It really has insane output and beam concentration, allowing it to reach out to huge distances to be able to see things quite a bit further than you might expect. In fact, this light has a higher candela rating than even one of my most carried 18650s. So it has a further beam distance than this light. Even though this is higher on the lumen count, this one can actually see farther, technically speaking. So very, very, very impressive. It has 3 modes, lowest being 50, the highest being 800. And it has a middle mode as well. I'll put some stats for you to see. The one interesting thing I have with this light is when it uses a AA, it forgoes the high mode and you get 50 lumens, and then you get the medium as well, which is around that 400 mark. Now that's very impressive, but it feels like they missed a massive opportunity to not have an even lower mode that would work better in the dark, because the problem is that the 50 lumen mode on this is still far too bright if you're in a dark room. I mean, it is very, very, very bright. And so I definitely think that would have been great to have. It doesn't have the runtime some of the other flashlights do that have lower modes. Like for instance, if I take the AceBeam Pokelit AA, the lowest mode here is quite a bit lower, and the runtime is significantly higher than the 50 lumen mode on the MT1A Pro. But you can see the difference. There are situations where I don't want more light than this. So I feel like with at least the AA, they could have done a little bit more and made it functional. That's true with the larger version as well. Still though, The tail switch on this is much, much better than other flashlights in this category, even better than one of my favorite AA's or 14500 lights, the Multitool T1 Pro Tech. So the cover prevents accidental depressing of the button, and along with making it able to tail stand. And I think this is the kind of switch that every single flashlight should have, regardless of what size it is, because I don't find whether you're coming over the top with your hands like this or like this, it doesn't make it that much more difficult. But from a side hit, it absolutely does keep it from getting accidentally depressed. And that is a huge thing. The last thing I want is a light that I have to unlock in order to use. And this actually does that and does it really well. The TAC AA from AceBeam also has a really good cover like this as well. Maybe even better than the one on the MT1A. And these are surprisingly comparable lights when it comes to output and candela rating. Where they differ is in the body dimensions. So you can see this is quite clearly a bigger flashlight. And what that translates to is it's very difficult to fit this into organizers, whereas this is just a straight body. This one does have lower modes though, so that's something of consideration. It just doesn't have the reversible clip, which is probably the one thing that it doesn't have that would make me very, very likely to carry it if it did. Another great offering. This is one of the best AA's that Nitecore has ever released, without question. It has incredible output and great efficiency. It seems to manage heat relatively well, even on turbo. So that's also very nice to see. And I want to see more. I think it's difficult to perfect a tail switch flashlight when it comes to UI. There's very few solutions that appease everyone. So I get that part, but from a stat perspective, from a form factor perspective, they've actually done a very, very, very good job. So I can highly recommend the MT1A Pro. I don't think these have hit Amazon just yet or any other distributors, but you can find them on Nitecore's website. Any links that I have for this product, I will put down below. I am a huge fan of this form factor for sure. It is essentially the size of the smaller Pokelit AA, but with a significantly higher potential output. The cool white version of this with 1000 lumens is still less than half as powerful if you consider beam concentration. And that is a stat that not enough people are paying attention to when they select a flashlight. It tells you just how much brightness is in the area that takes up the lumen count. If you think lumens are kind of like the size of the pipe, okay, where this might be 500, this might be 1000, how much pressure occurs in these areas or how much light is the beam concentration. So having a flashlight like this, which has only 550 lumens or around 500 tested, but with a very concentrated beam, you actually end up having a brighter light than even a larger 18650 with 1500 lumens. In that small hotspot, it is actually more intense than this light is. That's a very important consideration that people don't look at enough. So picking the right light for the right purpose means a big thing. Okay, I'm sorry, I sidetracked a little bit. The general gist though is that the MT1A Pro is certainly worth a consideration. Now, when I visited Coast at SHOT Show in January, I was incredibly impressed with their new lineup. And one of the lights that stuck out to me was the Slayer series. It just looked so much higher quality than what I expect from Coast. And they really have improved substantially on their lineup, especially when it comes to the hardware itself. Now, speaking of the hardware, this is a solid aluminum body. We have a silicone cover at the back that reveals a Type-C charging port. It is, in certain cases, it is waterproof, and in certain cases, it is not. So I will start by pointing out on these boxes, there is a difference in waterproof rating. The laser is IP54, and the base model is IP67. So big difference. The base model is much better when it comes to waterproofing. Of note, the other difference you're going to notice here is we have magnets in the bottom of the laser variation, which ends up being my favorite of the two, and I'll explain why a little bit later. And the pocket clip. So the pocket clip is designed to be deep carry, but unfortunately the screws get in the way, and I've been unable to get my pants in any thickness to go beyond these screws. So if they really wanted it to be deep carry, they could have simply used countersunk screws. But as it sits, you're going to have about that much of the flashlight sticking out in your pocket. So just be aware of that. All right, now let's talk for a second about the UI. All right, because they are different in each of these lights. And we'll start with the base model Slayer. I have no idea who at Coast came up with this, but it makes no sense at all. This flashlight and many of their other flashlights come in on medium. Not high, not low, medium. And then they hide the low mode at the very end. And to beyond that, in order to shut off the light, you have to cycle through all your modes. You can't just hold press, turn it off. In fact, a hold press on the front switch that activates all the modes gives you 30 seconds of turbo burst. In this case, 1,150 lumens. In order to turn it off from there, you have to actually cycle through all of the modes. Now, if you leave a light on for a couple of seconds, I think it ends up being about 10 seconds or so, you can then press it one time and it will turn off. So if you were using it for like a few minutes, you can just press it once and it will shut off. So that's something, but it's not ideal by any stretch. And I think it should work now. There you go. That's how that works. Now, the second button here is a mode that you can program to be memorized. So you turn this on or turn it off. Right now I have it set up in the low, which is honestly helps a lot and alleviates some of my annoyance with the regular output settings. So I have it set on the low like this. Now, if I wanted to say that's medium, that's high, let's say I wanted the spot, which is like it's like a beam distance that is much further. So this goes 106 meters. So if I wanted to memorize this mode, what I'm going to do is hold press the bottom button until it blinks. There we go. Now, when I turn off the light, which because it was sitting long enough, it turns off. If I turn it on, now I get spot and I can turn it on and off. So that alleviates a lot of my issues with the UI, but it doesn't mean it can't be better. So just keeping that in mind, use it to your best advantage. My preference is to always have it come in on the low, simply because if I'm in a dark room, I want the lowest light possible so I don't ruin my night vision. That's why I don't understand the starting on medium of all things, because it's neither enough in emergency or low enough in a dark room. So it doesn't hit any of the things I want ever. And I've never heard anyone say, wow, going one click to the next mode, really inconvenient. Like, that's not really a thing, right? Especially if you know it goes low, medium, high, and so on and so forth. Now, not bad, and I certainly like that it is waterproof, so that is a certain consideration, but it is not my favorite of the two. I actually much prefer the laser version for a couple reasons. Number one, the UI makes a lot more sense to me, because even though it doesn't come in on the lowest mode, it does, however, come in on the high. So it goes high, low, moon. So it goes from high to low. Okay, well, that's actually not the end of the world in my opinion. And if I know how it functions, that means I could cover this up if need be, and I could go 1, 2, and 3 and get to the low mode if I wanted to keep my eyes from getting, blown out and losing my night vision. So not only does this have a more logical UI, it also has a really great feature that I want to see more often with lights that use a laser. So right now you have the beam on, but you can also activate the laser at any time with a momentary press. And the cool thing about this light is it doesn't keep the laser on, which can potentially be a problem. So I actually think momentary is usually going to be all you need, and I can still adjust I can still adjust the output as I see fit while keeping the laser usable. When I use the other flat flashlights similar to the Arcfeld Pro, I basically am limited to only using the turbo in combination with the laser. So in theory, I can go with a lower mode then and also combine that with a laser. So if I'm working up close and I'm trying to point something out, I can do that as well. I actually kind of like this one. If it weren't for the waterproof rating, it would be a no-brainer. I don't think most people are going to worry about it. This is going to be a light that I think was dedicated more towards people in the trades, with having that magnet attachment, maybe even being able to use it to kind of like spot the distance, you know, kind of giving you a approximation of where something might be marked. It's not going to be a level. It's not a laser level, but maybe you can kind of, you know, eyeball it using this laser. So I definitely think it's a good offering. It's amazing to see how far Coast has come in a very short time. It's just, you want to be made aware of all of these downsides. You can always access the turbo with a hold press. You're going to get the high by pressing it just one time. It's not a perfect system, but certainly I think the Slayer laser kind of does more than enough to justify itself. And because I understand the UI a little bit better, and it has a more logical progression in output, it's not that complicated to, like I said, cycle to the lowest mode really quick and then use it from there. Most of the time, you're gonna need either the high or the low, and at least it's coming in on the high. So there's that. And you can still get access to turbo on either of these lights, simply hold pressing. So overall, decent job. Not bad at all, I gotta say. Next, we have a new entry to the flat flashlight craze. This is the Jetbeam E26. Now, this is a true tactical flashlight. A tactical flashlight requires it to be a tail switch capable light that accesses strobe directly with a single press. It also has the ability to access strobe from the tail switch as well. With a maximum output of 2000 lumens, it's very, very impressive. It also has glass breaker inserts along the bezel, which is nice. Not a crenulated bezel, which can get these flashlights taken from TSA. So that's nice. A very functional front end on this thing. Now, from a size perspective, this is much closer to the Nitecore E25 or 27 than it is to something like the Arcfeld Pro. You can see quite a bit difference in the length of this light. Similar in dimension, but definitely a bigger light overall. And it's reflected also in, well, the reflector. So there you go. Now, tail switch. Oh, I have it in lockout. So this is actually something I really, really, really like about this light. It actually has a mechanical lockout, which I am for that. I am very, very for that. So let's go ahead and switch it to the light mode for just a second. Now it is ready to rock and roll. Now it doesn't matter whether we have the it on the UV or whatever. It's notice that it's not turned on. I still have to press the center button in order for it to be actuated. And the same thing is true with the laser. And the same thing is true with the light. Now we'll get to that front light in just a second. There's two different emitters there. This one on the tail switch gives you a turbo with a single press. It's going to give you 2000 lumens output. Very, very, very bright. So really nice job done there. This will also give you access to strobe. Let me just give you a warning there. So look away if you need to. If you have press really quickly, you instantly get momentary strobe, meaning when you let go, it turns off. Perfect. Literally perfect. It's exactly the way it should be. This mechanical tail switch is a great consideration. I only have one qualm with it, is that I worry it may be just a little bit too proud of the frame. And maybe the switch distance is okay, but maybe there needs to be little guards on either side. We talked about this when it came to the Nitecore over here. I think this is really important. I think that it makes a big difference and allows you to keep the light not in lockout, and so it's ready to go whenever is necessary. Okay, so we talked briefly, we showed briefly the UV output. So it does have a UV output, and that's going to be pretty cool. Also kind of scary to use these things because sometimes you just better not to know. but UV light has its purposes and it's nice to have on this light. Very good for EDC purposes. Now, like finding rodents and stuff. And when it comes to laser, it's very similar in power to one I will get with the Arcveld Pro. I would say it's a little bit less powerful. So that's a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, it's honestly still something I can definitely see at a distance. I just think they could have probably put a little bit more power in it, most likely. And there's no reason to say that they can't, because, well, we have something that we know does. Okay, now let's move on to the light output here. Now this is really cool. So if I hold press, I get, if I press here, I get my memorized modes, okay? And we'll notice this is actually a warm high CRI emitter. It's the other version. Now low, high, and then higher, and then it goes to the white emitter at maximum output. So when it cycles back down, it switches emitters to the high CRI. Still a high CRI here, so it's still warmer, as you can tell. And then look at this here, then you can switch, and then now we have a cool white. So it goes from one to the other. It switches sides. Overall, it's a great light, I gotta say. The fact that it has a Type-C port that is exposed yet is fully waterproof is something I really like. I would love to, like I said, see the guards come up over the button. It is not going to be a light that's going to fit on a hat, so you're not going to be able to use it hands-free. So that is a bit of a negative, but I don't think that's what they were going for with this light. I think this is definitely geared more towards the tactical realm of things with that tail switch. It does get pretty hot. So one thing I'm going to warn you guys, when you're using that tail switch, it gets hot pretty fast. It's going to fall down on output after a few minutes due to heat. It's going to do so automatically. But in the meantime, the brightness is really intense. So nice job from Jetbeam on this one. I always have mixed feelings about this. It is kind of a large light, and I think there's a point with these flat flashlights where you start to lose the benefits. I think that's kind of true with the Coast as well, where yes, it's very comfortable in the pocket because of the form factor this way, but you start getting heavier and heavier, and then it starts being more difficult to carry for a lot of people. So I want to do like a full recap of flat flashlights in general. I might do that in the future, but as of right now, I think Jetbeam has offered something quite nice here. It's a combination of what you might get with the EDC 25 or 27, but with more of the versatile functions with the laser and the UV. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this light. And just a reminder, once I said, make sure you get the SFT40, okay? Make sure you get the new version because it's going to perform even better than this light, all right? So with that, let's recap. Sometimes when we get flashlights, I have to tell people it's not really worth it. In this case, all of these lights have something going for them that might make them a consideration. Whether it's low budget, the ability to use AA's, different versatility with the Coast lights, and also being available in store in many cases, Home Depot, or just having some versatility to go along with, and tactical nature to go along with the functions of a Arcveld Pro, without, of course, having to deal with proprietary charging. Overall, good job. I love this space because the speed at which things are advancing is truly remarkable. Every company seems to be making big strides in the forward direction, and I'm looking forward to more. As always, thank you guys so much for your time, and we'll talk again soon.